climate change, without a doubt. I live in Florida, and we're at least a decade behind those of you in this state in even admitting how serious the problem is, and we don't have a decade to spare, so that really does concern me. The other thing is, I think Jason may have referenced this, and that is digital disinformation. The technology that, folks who don't have the ethics that Joshua has are creating that make it increasingly difficult for us to understand what is real and what is not real. So I would say every school should be teaching digital media literacy in terms of what's going forward. What excites me, what makes...
Where do you find hope?
Where do I find it? Right here. Mm-hmm. And I mean that seriously. The young generation of activists who, realize that they're going to inherit this world and they're really moving forward to do that. And I think that's really, really exciting. So.
All right, great. Thank you.
I guess this isn't it's a kind of hard for me to use the word fear, so I'll use the word warning. The biggest warning that I've been paying attention to is alignment with climate change is depopulation. And let me explain myself real briefly on what I mean by depopulation. I'm not talking about a fairy tale. I'm talking about something that's super real. So you look at like climate resiliency, climate change. These are things that in America, in the first world economy, we can tackle with new technology problems. But what about in third world countries? How do they fight that? Okay, so when you look at like the powers that be that can allocate resources on a global and local scale, right now, 46% of the world lives in extreme poverty. Not 26%, not 10%. Almost half of the world is in extreme poverty, like worse than San Francisco homelessness, right? And this is like, when you look at homelessness in America, that's paradise for some people, okay? You understand what I'm saying? So when you look at both of those factors at the same time, how are these people going to survive past, we have to get shots just to go to other countries. And we're not accepting new immigrants into our country right now, unfortunately. But when you look at, where are all these people going to go? Where are they going to live? So the hope I have is not some crazy space frontier, we're going to go live on the moon and Mars. I mean, I'd love to do that. But the hope I see is in being able to learn how to live in communities versus in isolation. Let me give you an example. A lot of people that are wealthy in the East Coast or in the South have mega mansions. I mean, for the price of an apartment in San Francisco, you get a 3 acres and a mule, right, down in the South, right? But in the reality of the world, what's happening, a lot of people are learning to live as minimalists. And minimalism helps us to, create a circular economy. And a part of a circular economy is something called a functional economic model. A functional service economy is basically when you take something and instead of trying to own it, you repurpose it. So you look at Uber. A vehicle that Uber gets could be from a rental car place, and a rental car place has to get those cars on the road. Now, no matter what Uber driver uses that car for whatever period of time, that car is being utilized by a community of drivers, serving a community of riders. So that means that we need less manufacturing and more use of what we have. So right now, one of the biggest things I tell people is that in order to have a minimalist society or a society where we can essentially live as a community, we have to be able to directly put our thoughts and hearts and minds into the concept of living in lesser lavish environments with more useful items. Because right now, as it stands, there's more innovation and adoption in society. We innovate like crazy. We have so much innovation. But if I told you about blockchain and do you have a Bitcoin wallet, how many people here can raise their hand? That's the problem. My point is, there's this wonderful technology like Bitcoin and this, concept of blockchain, which is real, but we haven't even caught up to use it. And the same problem is this in enterprise. Everyone's preaching about Industrial 4.0, right? And then you still have enterprises facing challenges with Enterprise 2.0. Okay, this is a very real concept. Like, how many people here have a school wiki or a school forum or for students? Yeah, they all part. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But a lot of people are still trying to use, in the college setting, they use Blackboard. Okay, a lot of students use Blackboard. Okay, can you imagine the technology that has outpaced Blackboard? Yeah. Okay, and we're still trying to get users to adopt Blackboard. That's my point of innovation is there, but adoption isn't. So that's my hope, is that we live in a society where there's more community versus individualism.
Great, thank you. And Jason, that question for you, what is it that concerns you most about the future, and where do you find hope?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep my concern to the domain of education and learning, because I think that there's knock-on implications of this. So the thing that I'm most concerned about, specifically to this domain, and over the past couple of years this has become more and more pronounced, is that fears over the future of work are actually acting as a constraining force when we try to form bolder aspirations or visions when it comes to the future of learning. Now, part of that's the reality that the workforce sector and the employment sector has massive sway over public education. And part of one of the three pillars, or the three big pieces that form the overall purpose for learning, should be getting you ready for career, civic life, and further learning. But because of that fear, and because of sort of that imbalance of power, because we've rooted essentially our intellectual infrastructure really in the commerce layer of society, that we're seeing this constraint rather than the broadening of what we believe education could be for. So it's really reducing it to ideas of the future that are really rooted in like the basest, most transactional ideas of what education could and should be for. And that I find alarming for a lot of reasons, right? School at its best is a place where you're, of wonder and awe. And you lay the first steps of becoming the person that you're going to be in adulthood. You lay the foundations for lifelong and lifeline learning. It could be a place that is instrumental in reweaving the social fabric. And a lot of the public discourse and a lot of the innovation that becomes adopted and baked into the current system is more in service of just building a better worker. So that's alarming. But I do march in the army of optimism. So there's a lot of things that I'm excited about for the future. So first, Joe mentioned young people and kids. Yes, yes, and yes. And there's two other pieces. One, if we zoom out far enough, we see a lot of positive trajectory in terms of trends. And I challenge anybody in the room. Joe talked about 15th century and a map. Not one of us would go back in history and say, I'm going to stay in the 15th century. And we've got to look at that for what it is. So that's two. And the third one I'll say is really generally you all, right? The idea that the public, by and large, are hungry for future thinking, to think about the future in novel ways, in nuanced ways. That's been something that has been one of the biggest pleasures in my professional life, is to see that public appetite to think about the future just grow and grow and grow. I think all three of those are massively positive forces that are going to really reshape the world.
All right, thank you.